And so, the dukedom brought us, of course, the King's Stage. There were princes here, but who on earth would be race royalty on this, the pivotal day on the Skoda Tour of Luxembourg? Some nervous times at the start, but glorious weather and the crowds out in force on what has been an absolutely beautiful day, but a hellish one for those who wanted to take on the bid for glory. 3 laps of a punishing circuit, destination ultimately the Vianden Castle. Pavée up front, and up front early on, 6 hopefuls, just wanting to assemble points in the King of the Mountains competition presumably, but the gap, never an enormous one, moderated at first by EF Education-EasyPost, hoping that Carapaz, Albanese, Ben Healy, big roster, could actually feature towards the end. And then when we came onto the circuit, suddenly everyone realised just how tough this place can be. Healy had been a winner in the past, Hirschi gone strongly, but what about today? Both of them here, along with others as well that could really make a noise, when indeed the rattling stopped and we got to the smooth section that would carry us, well, to heaven, or maybe hell. Didi was on site, and indeed so was the sight of many riders in technical trouble. Punctures aplenty, not a nice thing. And so it was we settled ourselves into a real grind. And it was a battle of attrition. Good riders were being thrown out the back. Stefan Bissiger, one of those that went first. Papon out of the break. Goodnitz found it too much. They would not be alone. A mighty test in this amazing race. Well, finally we were down to 4 up front, but honestly the peloton itself was also being shredded. An ever-diminishing group of hopefuls trying to take on this huge test at the end of the day. Doesn't matter how big a mountain is, it's how hard you ride into it. And some were prepared to do more work perhaps than others. Søren Kragh started on early, his duty to wind in this break, maybe have a dig for glory himself, and maybe Skjelmose or Geoghegan Hart from Little Trek, possibly Thomas Squinch, good time trialist. Would he be minded to keep something back for the day after? They weren't preserving anything, least of all the horses, you might say, and this roller coaster went on. Slowly but surely we were getting nearer and nearer to the front. The chasing group would ultimately become the front group, and that is when the story would be told. The yellow jersey, our leader, Romain Grégoire, finding himself in trouble. Over 2 minutes down, Ben Healy decided that he would try and bridge over, but we were getting very selective in the run to the Vianden Castle, an edifice that had been here since the year 275, can you believe it? In 1925 they decided that hydropower might well be the way forward, hence the dam. That's forward thinking. Meanwhile, going forward, having to. Ben Healy kicked on, but who was in his wake? A wake-up call for the overall leader of this race, and suddenly holes were opening up in the lifeboats of those who wanted to sail home today. The sunshine was glorious, the fans likewise, but one after the other riders were being found out, particularly from the break. That was thinning down, and then a very select group of superstars were assembling themselves in the chase. The peloton split. More than that, it absolutely fractured. Who would be there at the end? We just didn't know. Narvaez, Hirschi, they were in a chase. Grégoire was going backwards, as we mentioned, and that gap was becoming a huge one. He was going to lose the leader's jersey. Healy himself also looked like he was struggling, peddling squares, some might say, but that was the nature of the day. A glorious part of the world, our playground, but everyone's eyes up front, and suddenly UAE Team Emirates, with McNulty, with Narvaez, with Majka of course as well, they were starting to get invested. Groupama, they were trying to bail out what looked like a sinking ship. Donaverth was the best of them as Grégoire went backwards. Well, would it be UE, Little Trek, Groupama, Decathlon, EF Education? There was so much to play for. It was time for our final lap. The Montée de Niklosbierg. Well, it'd be remembered long and hard for exactly that, being long and hard, especially if indeed you tried to get a gap. They were struggling back there. Well, that group of pre-race favourites were being shattered. Meanwhile, Maiku dropped out and then dropped back into the fray. He decided to help out. Soren Krauw was struggling, still not giving up Romain Grégoire, but it was a question of damage limitation for those guys. And suddenly we were getting a very, very tight group of brothers up front. Marco Brenner was in there, Big Anzoli, Kulzert as well. This was going to be a battle royal. And then, of course, well, Hirschi joined his two teammates up front and decided that he would try and indeed stretch the legs of minds of everybody. He had Brenner and Rondell up there. Micah got back in the fray. Squinch was starting to pedal. And this became the head of the race. Well, just like Hydra, you chop off the heads of Hydra and more threats develop. And that's exactly what we had. The threat was too much for some. Narvaez looked like he was struggling, a surprise. And then Hirschi said, to hell with this, I'm out of here. And so he entered a hellish distance of 6.4 kilometres, all on his own, a modest margin. Others didn't panic. They had something perhaps left in the chamber. He was going for it in the dappled sunshine. Would it be a bright day for him? He knows this finish extraordinarily well, and he also knew maybe he'd gone too early. 800 metres, he had a gap of just 9 seconds. Would it be enough to carry it all the way? No panic behind. Squinch was doing a job, but on behalf of whom? That was the question. Skjelmose was still in there, so was Brenner. Kulzert as well. Absolutely magnificent, and heartbreak for Hirschi. Just coming into the last couple of bends on the pavée, it all crumbled away from him. This was absolutely remarkable. Out of nowhere, from Team Total Energies, Jordan Jegat decided to come and join the pun. Mattias Skjelmose launched. Jegat was wrestling to try and get round those who were fading. Brennan McNulty looked like he was in trouble. Narvaez was still here, but Skjelmose, could he, would he hold on into the last couple of corners? This was a proper wrestling match. And in the end, by the time we got to the line, the Little Trek man was able to hold off Jordan Jegat. What spirit!
I mean, it was a difficult final, and Marc was really good. He was really strong, and it was difficult to catch him. Luckily, Brandon started his sprint early, and I could overtake in the last moment.
Absolutely remarkable. Skjelmose took it. Jegat disappointed. Brad McNulty in third place ahead of Jonathan Narvaez. That spun out to some mighty moves overall, including, I'm afraid, a bad move for our leader, Grégoire, down the order. But Skjelmose, king of the hill, quite literally. 4 seconds clear of Jegat and 8 ahead of McNulty. With the time trial coming up, all three of those could well thrive.